Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of the Geeking Out podcast. I'm joined this week with new equipment that we've battled for an hour with Koriander Bullard, who has had a lot of art go up around here on the interwebs, but probably most importantly, at least in terms of this channel, she made the logo. She created the logo and the sticker that is now, at least for a short period of time, was on a sign outside of Madison Square Garden and handed out to many people at WrestleCon and GalaxyCon Louisville. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for letting me do the logo.
Oh yeah, I love it, and so is a lot of people. So it's really popular, and we're glad we have it. So the first question I have is, I discovered you through you were doing like anime style art with Ring of Honor wrestling. So I gotta ask you first, what got you into both wrestling and anime?
Well, the answer to both of those is my mom. I was born a preemie on November 3rd, 1986, and as a precaution, they kept me in the hospital for a couple of days. When they finally released me, the first nighttime show, because it was late at night when I finally got out, the first nighttime show that my mom put on was actually independent wrestling. My mom grew up with wrestling, her dad grew up with wrestling, and he got into wrestling because of his aunt. His aunt actually loved wrestling so much that when she passed away, she was buried on this hill out in Knoxville. And if you stand on the hill with a telescope, you can find the Knoxville arena where a lot of the shows she went to happened. So even in death, she's not far away from the action.
Wow. Oh wow. So you got into it through your mom. Okay, that was wrestling. What about anime? Um,
Uh, with anime, that too came through my mom. When I was little, my mom used to watch Robotech and reruns of Speed Racer while she
nice.
would yeah, she used to watch those shows while she was getting ready for work. And then when I was about 8, um, we had a different TV station in New Jersey. It's not around anymore. We lived in New Jersey for a very short while, and they had this one station where in the morning they would play the edited runs of syndicated anime shows like Sailor Moon and Dragon Ball Z, and then real late at night they would play fan subs and fan dubs of all the episodes that were being cut out for American
Wow.
broadcast.
Wow, that's cool. Um,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
what?
something else.
So would you say that DBZ, Sailor Moon are some of your favorites, or
Dragon Ball Z, Sailor Moon, those are definitely high on my list. Sailor Moon being my favorite. I watch a little bit of everything. I love Slayers. Um, let's see. I'm currently watching Love is War, Kaguya-sama. That's a new one. That's a good comedy. I
I
watch a little bit of everything. I have all the anime apps on my Roku.
see? Whenever I like to think I am an anime fan, but then whenever I talk to somebody who's really into it, I realize that I have not seen anything at all. Truthfully.
Well, that's okay, because like a lot of titles we're still just now starting to get. A lot of TV stations, they didn't want to take up anime during the 80s and 90s because they thought it was too weird. Maybe people wouldn't understand it. But I think after the anime boom of the late 90s, that's when a lot more people started realizing, hey, this thing could be profitable.
Oh, I'm sure it was Toonami. For me, ironically, it was Superman that got me into anime because I would want to watch Superman on Toonami, and then one time I would just turn it on there early, and DBZ was on, and then I got into it. So that was kind of my Superman, who is so cool to hate on. I feel by anime fans because of the big, who's tougher, him or Goku sort of fan discussion. Ironically, it was Superman that made me know who Goku was, but that's a little sidebar. So you've mentioned anime. What are some of your earliest memories of pro wrestling?
Well, one of my earliest memories of pro wrestling, I think I was watching AWA. I remember there was a boy in the ring, And they had changed the name of this boy like 5 times. And he had started off as just one of these carpenter jobbers. He would just come into the ring and get clobbered and go home. But there was something about him that I could not take my eyes off of. He just had this twinkle in his eyes. And I remember my first memory of him, I remember him wrestling Dominic DeNucci. And then he showed up a couple of more times, and after a while he stopped losing and he started winning. And I followed this boy's career from the time I couldn't really talk and I was in diapers all the way through until he won the championship on WWE Raw when it was WWF. And he was the first jobber I ever met. I met him at a book signing. But by this time, nobody was calling him like the job boy anymore. They were calling him Mick Foley.
That's awesome.
So Mick is actually the reason why those matches are the ones I pay attention to, because you really don't know. Like, the kid that's getting his butt kicked today, he might be a champion someday.
Right. Yeah, that's so you mentioned AWA. Anything else like mentioned AWA? Like anything else that really stood out from your childhood as far as wrestling is concerned? I know there's Mick Foley, but we've had a lot of conversations. There's a lot of wrestlers out there. Any more you'd like to share?
Oh my gosh, when I was really little, my mom had a good cable package, so we got a lot of wrestling shows from around the country. So like we each state we lived in, we would get to watch Smoky Mountain, USWA, AWA, NWA television outside of WCW. We watched a little bit of everything. We got both UWF shows, the Herb Abrams UWF and the Bill Watts UWF.
Wow.
Yeah, I remember
Herb
watching.
Abrams is very timely at the time of this recording after what just aired. So
Oh my goodness, yes.
dating
Very
ourselves
much
just a little
so.
bit, but
Early memories, I remember watching Shawn Michaels when he had like just bushy hair and bushy eyebrows and really hadn't come into his own, had no tattoos. And my mom was a tape trader too.
oh
So,
wow.
yeah, my mom was into tape trades. So there was this guy at the comic book store that she used to trade tapes with, and he would always tape stuff from Japan. So through him, we would see the Pegasus Kid. We saw Jericho when he was fluffy and young and skinny. Um, we would get tapes from Canada, and like Lance Storm was another one we saw like early footage of. So like when these guys would go to ECW and to WCW and WWF, everybody was like, "Oh, look at this hot young prospect," and I'm just kind of like staring there confused, just like, but I've been watching him for years.
Right. So there's one particular story I could not wait for you to tell, and this has to do with how you got in. We many years ago you told me this story. How you got into ECW and subsequently a random encounter with an ECW legend. Would you mind sharing that one?
Oh, this is one of the coolest things that's ever happened. Okay, so I had moved to New Jersey in the summer of 1994. Um, I I was like, well, I was in between New York and New Jersey in '94. We ran into a bad situation. We were kind of going back and forth because of my dad's job. And at the time, we were starting to watch ECW because that was like the big thing to watch in that area. So we were getting into ECW pretty heavily. My mom, she actually saved the newspaper clipping of when Sandman had caned Tommy Dreamer. We actually had like a big newspaper clipping because it made all the papers in the
Wow.
area.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. Oh, it was big front page news. Like people were up in arms about it. They were like, "Oh my God, can you believe this filthy thing happened on TV?" And my mom's looking at the paper like, "Oh, hey, look, there's Tommy Dreamer." So this one time we had ordered pizza, and this boy comes to the door, and he's got a ball cap over his eyes, and he's like trying to hide his face for some reason. And he brings the pizza to my mom, and he's like, "Okay, well that'll be 22.50." And my mom's like, "Here you go." And he's like trying to count the change, and he tips his cap up just a little bit. And my mom looks underneath, and she's like, "No way." no way, Tommy? Tommy, is that you? And he's like, uh, do you want a receipt, ma'am? And he's like trying to hide himself. And I'm coming down the stairs. I'm like, Mom, is the pizza? Oh my God, it's Tommy Dreamer. And I like fell on my ass.
Aw.
And I was like 7.5, and like there's my hero right in front of me delivering my pizza. It was the coolest moment. He was trying so hard to like hide who he was, but he couldn't once I had fallen down the stairs. It was just like, it's Tommy Dreamer. And like for years, I guess it was like a secret that he had been delivering pizza on the side. But then years later, when they did the Rise and Fall of ECW DVD set, there he was talking about being a pizza boy during that time. And I was like, I knew it was you.
Yeah, that's kind of. I don't know whether to think. It's a cool story, but I don't know how I would feel as a kid. I don't know if I'd think, all right, or if that would just shatter my illusion of all wrestlers are big superstars that have big mansions and everything like that that I believed for so many years. Uh, Luckily for you, it did not shatter any illusions whatsoever.
No, it was like the coolest thing. Like your childhood hero just shows up randomly with a box of pizza when you're starving. Like that is the coolest thing.
So there's what before I even found your videos and by subsequent like found your pages and found you on Facebook and all that fun stuff and my actually I think it was MySpace back in the day before I found now that I really think about it. Um,
Hmm.
you I unknowingly saw you for the first time on a Ring of Honor DVD from WrestleMania weekend 2006, I believe. Yeah, it's 2006.
March 31st, 2006. Oh my
So
goodness.
that's how I saw you. But how did you get into Ring of Honor? And then we'll get into your what may be your crowning moment in Ring of Honor history.
Well, with Ring of Honor, I remember this. There was an interview that Mick Foley had done for our newspaper, and he put over Ring of Honor like crazy. He was like, "Hey, if you want to see something different in wrestling, you got to check out this Ring of Honor promotion." And it was like a few weeks later, we found out that Ring of Honor was going to be doing a show at the Frontier Fieldhouse. So we drove over there, and my mom got us tickets, and she was like looking at the card. They had like a big marquee up, and she looked at who was going to be there, and she's like, "Oh, Jim Cornette, Bobby Heenan, what?" So it was like a couple weeks later we had gone. This was my first show was the February 26th, 2005 Ring of Honor taping in Chicago Ridge. And the first pre-show match, I was hooked. I was hooked right away with it because it was unlike what they were doing on TV at the time. At the time, there wasn't a lot of wrestling to choose from. Everything had pretty much been done and over with. There was no more Monday Night Wars. So it was either you watched WWE, you watched TNA, or you watched nothing.
Right.
So to go from that to this high energy technical company, it was amazing. And it was just like a who's who of wrestling that we saw that night. There were like every single indie prospect at that moment was at that show, along with a lot of guys that were still wrestling on TV for TNA. And Bobby Heenan was there, Jim Cornette was there. Remembering the card, CM Punk, Colt Cabana, Homicide, Bryan Danielson, well, Daniel Bryan, pardon me.
Right. The OGs
Like,
remember his real name.
I know, I know. It's so strange because like you go to the local Meijer here, and you see little kids in the aisle getting their action figures, and sometimes I'll muse to myself, oh, I remember when he was Bryan Danielson, and they all stare at me like, who the heck are you talking about? That's
Right.
Daniel Bryan, dummy.
Oh yeah, I remember. I've never had anything like that, but I do remember when the time I finally got to meet Brian. Um, and I think I've told this story on other episodes. Um, that was the ROH show in Collinsville with Ric Flair. It was the first time Ric Flair made an appearance with Ring of Honor, and that ended up being a whole can of worms. But I remember like meeting Ric Flair and just being like, like not being able like to really get words out because I'm like I'm meeting Ric Flair, and then I try and meet Brian after, and I'm like, oh my god, you're Brian Danielson. Oh my god, you're like, I love all your wrestling matches, man. You're like one of the best. I've been dying to meet you. And he's like, well, don't die. That's what. That's the like, well, don't die, please. So yeah, so that was my encounter of meeting him. He's kind of the probably the wrestler I will always connect to the most because he's one of the true ones that I really like before anybody even. I don't try to be the douchey hipster gatekeeper of wrestling, but he was kind of the one like I was liking Daniel Bryan before he was even called Daniel Bryan and anybody knew who he was and everybody said he was too small to make it. So I was that guy. But who you mentioned all these names. Do you remember who they wrestled, or remember which particular ROH? I know ROH don't sell their old shows on DVD anymore, unfortunately. But do you remember which event this became, or what matches took place on this card?
Oh my gosh, let me see if I remember. I know Brian wrestled Homicide that night, and I remember that because I had made a trip to the bathroom because we were like at the end of intermission. So I'd made a quick run to the bathroom. There was a huge line, and I had to wait all throughout intermission to get there. So as I'm coming back, I hear Homicide's music, and the match is starting. And as I'm trying to find my way in the dark, because this was before Ring of Honor changed out their lighting system at shows, it's a lot safer now. But back then, they had like no lights in the crowd. So the only light was the light of the ring itself. So I'm trying to find my way back through the crowd, and I don't realize yet that Brian and Homicide have gone into the crowd too. So I'm as I'm trying to find my way back to my seat, this mob comes out of nowhere. And I'm trapped. It's dark. I don't know where I'm going. And I trip and fall. And I look up, and all I see are just like feet coming at me. And I'm thinking, well, I'm going to die here at a wrestling show. And just at the last minute, this boy comes up and like throws his arms over me. And he takes the brunt of the crowd. And I didn't die. And that boy, I didn't realize was a trainee at Ring of Honor. His name was Bobby Dempsey.
Oh
So
wow!
Bobby saved my life. And for those who have the old DVDs, it's a split second. You got to squint your eyes because it's really dark. But you can actually see me behind Brian and Homicide on the DVD after I've tripped and fallen.
Oh wow! So that was your first Ring of Honor experience, was almost being killed by Homicide and Brian Danielson. So, so it's a good thing that nothing happened because you did come back and you became rather quite a regular at Ring of Honor. Did you go to all the? Did you guys go to all the Chicago Ridge shows after that, or was it kind of pick and choose? Did you go to the cage match? Or I don't even know if that was that even in Chicago, the
Oh,
Raven.
yes,
Okay,
yes, it
yeah, there you go.
was.
Did you go to the Punk's final match?
Oh, yes. You can actually see me on the DVDs for those two events that you mentioned because I was on the barricade. We went to all of the Chicago Ridge shows until I want to say 2013. And the only reason why we stopped going was because they had started jacking up the ticket prices, and I was in the middle of the move from hell. So I had like no money.
Right.
But until then, like we went to all the Chicago Ridge shows, no problem. We loved it.
I wish I could have gone to one of the Chicago Ridge shows because we just well now like Ring of Honor, the last Ring of Honor title switch was in my area and I didn't even want to go, but that's another debate for another day. But you went to several Chicago Ridge shows. Ring of Honor in 2006, I want to say this is the first time they run WrestleMania weekend, and lo and behold, WrestleMania is in Chicago that year. So they run. Did they run all three shows in Chicago, or
They
just
ran they ran one show in Dayton, And then
Okay.
we had March 31st and April 1st, 2006, back-to-back double nights in Chicago Ridge. This was the first time they'd ever done that. I think they only did that one other time, with
Okay.
having two back-to-back shows the same weekend in Chicago Ridge. Because I remember the first taping we had in Chicago Ridge was on a Friday, the second was on a Saturday, and they booked it that way because here's the thing with Ring of Honor that a lot of people don't know. They weren't really that competitive. So, like, they knew a lot of people wanted to go to Hall of Fame because Bret was being inducted. Bret had been out of WWE for years, and they didn't want to get in the way of that. So the second night's taping was held at a different hour. That way, if you wanted to go to Hall of Fame, you can still, like, get on the train, get on the bus, go to Hall of Fame, and then come back in time to see the main event.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they usually try to work with the other promotions. They're not very competitive. It's kind of the standard at a lot of these WrestleMania weekends. They'll hold an earlier show so that you don't miss the Hall of Fame ceremony.
Okay. So at this time in Ring of Honor, for nobody who's following Ring of Honor at the time, uh, they were doing sort of I mean, I guess you would call it an invasion storyline with CZW. And this
Oh,
is,
yes.
and it was really, at least for the people in Philadelphia, it was really a competitive run because it was kind of like pick your side of the two major indies in Philly at this time. But the storyline, at least for Ring of Honor, they were spreading it out all over the place. Whereas I believe for CZW, it was just the Philly shows. So this is how Necro Butcher and Chris Hero and various others were got their start in Ring of Honor. So which leads us to this particular story that made one of those two nights. Well, that was the Super Card of Honor night, right?
Yep.
Okay, the very first Super Card of Honor in ROH history. Corey is featured on that DVD, and I'll just let you tell the story because there's nothing I can't do it justice. So,
Well, one thing I want to preface this with is that up until like mid 2007, most of the time, you were not going to be told you're being filmed for DVD or for any kind of international releases. So they were kind of sneaky about filming people back then. So I just want to throw that last part out. So I'm standing in line forever, and everybody's getting all hot and bothered. We want to get inside. We want to watch wrestling. Everyone's getting excited. It's WrestleMania weekend, of course. And then from out of nowhere, there's this douchebag who is jumping on people's cars. And he's like cussing people out, and he's like, oh, you guys are stupid. CZW's where it's at. And I hadn't really been following CZW, so like I kind of knew who he was, but not really. I hadn't seen IWA Mid-South yet. So I was like, who the fuck is this asshole? Oh, pardon my language there.
no, it's fine. You can say whatever you want.
Okay. So, like, he's jumping in people's cars and, like, making a good job of being an ass of himself. And I had joined the crowd. We had all just chanted, fuck you. And I guess my voice was just so light and different that he decided to seek me out. So he comes all the way up to me, and he's like, oh, looky here. And I'm just like, fuck you. And he's like getting really close, and you can't really see. Maybe you can tell on the DVD when this happened. My mom is behind me, and my mom is telling him to go to hell. And he's like looking at me, and he's like, oh, I bet your mom's real proud of that mouth, huh? And my mom stands up, and she's like, yes, I am. He's got this look of confusion on his face, like, what the fuck? And he's like, and he leans in close, and he's like, what the fuck are you? And I slapped him. Now, the reason why I hit him was because my mom was about to. And at the time, she was a lot stronger than I was. And I realized if she hits him, she's going to prison tonight. I must stop this. So I got between she and him, and I hit him. And he was just like taken aback by that. And the whole crowd was just taken aback and floored. And I didn't really think about it. I was just like, I want this guy away from my mom fast because I don't have bail money to save her.
Right.
So after the other wrestlers come out and they collect him and they beat the hell out of him and beat him off camera, that's when I had been informed that they were filming something, but I didn't know what they were filming for. So we fast forward a couple months and there's this DVD and it's like flying right off the shelves and I'm like, oh hey, that's from Chicago Ridge. So I grabbed like the last copy there and it was sold out and I take it home and I put it in and there I am slapping Chris Hero.
Was there any did any of the trainees or the people that work Ring of Honor, come up and say anything like, hey, he's cool with it, or was there any like brushback that day, or
Not at
any?
all.
Really, that is surprising because I mean, it was 2 years later, maybe even three at that point. Is when they finally start running St. Louis area once in a blue moon. And I remember Jimmy Jacobs' Spike flew into the crowd, and they had like every trainee going, do you got the spike? 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 And they're like so, looking for, they're so worried, and they had this much more controlled environment where it was just 2, 3 years earlier, somebody just hits one of the wrestlers, and it's cool.
The only time I ever like had anything like that happen, there was this one show, I think, yeah, it was 2009 now that I think about it. Brent Albright was having a match with Joey Ryan. And Brent had come into the crowd, and I was standing behind Brent taking pictures with my camera because that was kind of my thing at that time. Well, Joey Ryan takes a chair, and he throws it at Brent. Brent ducks, and the chair grazes my hip. The next thing I know, the referee has jumped out of the ring, gone straight through, bolt through the crowd, and he takes me aside. He's like, "Are you hurt? Are you okay? Oh my God, please don't sue us." And I showed him my ticket. I was like, "No, it's okay. Look." And on the back of the ticket, they used to print whatever. I don't remember the verbiage, but it was like, "Whatever happens to you, we're not liable for it. You know what you're getting yourself into." And it had like this whole legal thing on the back of the ticket, like, if you get hit, that's on you. You know what's going to happen because it's Ring of Honor. And I was like showing the ticket, like, no. See, it's printed on the ticket. You know what you're getting yourself into. We're cool. We're cool.
So, sticking with Ring of Honor, you make a video that goes viral, incorporating your art and Ring of Honor and anime and many, many different fandoms in one that I actually I'm not. This isn't a judgment on your video, but at the time I was a big poster on the WrestleCrap boards, and they would share like funny videos they would find of wrestling, and someone posted that, and I'm like, huh. That's interesting. I didn't think that would work so well together.
I didn't know I was on the WrestleCrap boards. Wow.
Yeah.
I guess a lot of people saw it.
Yeah. So, tell us about this viral video and what inspired you to make it and everything that went into it. I consider myself an anime fan, but this is a different anime fan. I don't want to say subculture. That kind of makes it seem like it's wrong, but it's like kind of this different area of anime fans that I'm not particularly familiar with. So explain the inspiration behind this video, what the video was, and everything about it.
Well, it all started when I gotten a video from my friend Mickey. He had showed me that there was this craze called called caramel dancing, and I was like, okay, what the hell is that? So there's this little anime video. It's done in CGI, and it's these three girls doing this cute little dance. And the song that they use in the video comes from this band called Caramel. I think they're out of Switzerland or Sweden. I'm not sure which of the two. But the entire song is really high-pitched, and it's just fun and upbeat. And I was like, I wonder what would happen if there was a wrestling version. So I looked through YouTube. There were no wrestling videos to this song at all. So I figured, fuck it. I'll try it myself. So I grabbed out my pen and I hand animated each of the wrestlers. I did like little segments of them interacting with each other, little segments where they were doing the dance, and I put it together on YouTube and I didn't think about it again. And then I got like a wave of comments. Like a bunch of people either didn't understand the video or they thought it was really funny. So I was like, I bet I could do a better one. So I did two more versions of that video with different scenes and different wrestlers. And I guess it was a hit backstage at Ring of Honor because the next time I went to a Ring of Honor show, like all the wrestlers were like, "You did that video!" So it was kind of like a thing. So I would just like do little wrestling drawings here and there, and they would share it on MySpace. They would talk to me about it at the shows, and it just made everybody happy.
The version that I remember seeing was you had clips of the dog collar match between Jimmy Jacobs and Austin Aries infused with all the dancing because that's just like what got me. I'm like, and I remember showing a friend of mine, and his reaction was, "Well, every anime cliche is covered. We have the bubbly characters, we have some dancing, and we have violence, gratuitous violence. So we're good." And that's the one that just stood out for me is because it just for some reason works so well with a violent, bloody imagery of Austin Aries and Jimmy Jacobs concluding their blood feud from 2008.
Yeah, that was. I wanted to make sure to have as many of the tropes in as possible. I didn't want to exclude the violence because this is wrestling,
Right.
so I had to have that in.
So you mentioned all the a lot of the wrestlers were talking to you about this. Did any of them, you know, ask you for artwork or want their animation cells or off like did this lead to any you doing any art for any of the wrestlers just as in
Well,
general?
each of them asked for like drawings just for themselves, and then they would post those drawings on their MySpace pages. And then a couple of times I've designed T-shirts for them too. I've done a couple of different T-shirts for Ace Steel, and those shirts are all on ProWrestlingTees.com.
Wow. So I'll find we'll find those and we'll post those in the description box in case anybody wants some of her wants to wear some of her artwork. I'll make sure that that's posted.
Yeah, it led me to a lot of things. The artwork led me to writing my first book, and it also led me to my husband.
Wow.
Because, yeah, yeah, now this is interesting. My husband, John, at the time, he was a wrestler too. He was wrestling in Kentucky. He was supposed to have a tryout with Ring of Honor at the big cage match show where Bobby Dempsey like completely left Larry Sweeney.
Okay.
But the night of that show, we had a horrible blizzard. Like a bunch of people that their cars had been totaled. Necro was in a wreck. So it was a very bad blizzard. So what I had done was I had found alternative routes to the Frontier Fieldhouse, and I went to Carrie Silkin's MySpace, and I posted all of the alternative snow routes so that the wrestlers could get there safely. John had seen this because he had gone to Carrie's page to see if the tryout was going to take place. The tryout had been canceled for that day, but he sees my snow routes and he sends me a friend request. And then, funnily enough, I didn't know this, but he was already friends with my mom on Facebook, and we never even knew it. It was just completely happenstance.
Oh wow.
John had seen my artwork, and he had me do some artwork for him. And then it was like about a year later, he also found out that I do websites as a hobby, so he had me do his website. And of course, I had to create different artwork for that. I had little skull heads that he wanted me to draw, so I did skull heads for the website. And then that led to me doing the website for PWF, and then that also led to John and I getting together.
What
And
was PWF just for
It was a promotion that my husband ran in Kentucky for a little while. Um, I did the website for that. Once we had moved in together, I would also be at the shows to help out with setting up the ring.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a good job there.
Putting
Um,
together a ring is always an interesting experience.
I personally love it because once you see what goes into a ring, there's no trampoline, there's no mattress, there's no springs. You see just the metal and the wood. Once you see how the ring really is set up, it makes you really appreciate these matches a lot more.
Absolutely. I remember the first ROH show in Collinsville. We actually, me and all my friends who went, we actually helped them take down the ring and load up a bunch of stuff. So it was really cool, just like literally just chilling with Bobby Dempsey, Rhett Titus, Alex Payne, uh, Hagedorn was there, but he was kayfabing us. Um, I think Adam Pierce was the booker at the time, and just like it was cool, just kind of hanging out. But that was like the fun time, helping tear down the set. Then there was another time before that, locally, close to the same area, where we were helping set up a ring for a show, and the promoter did not know how to put up the ring,
Oh
and
my God.
none of the like there were like maybe two wrestlers that were willing to help, and one of them was a nice guy, and one of them was a douchebag, and I do not remember their names. I just remember one guy was kind of a nice guy because I'm like, the show's like running an hour behind, 2 hours behind, and like I'm kind of like feeling like I'm screwing this up. So like I feel like, so I'm doing all this, and like this guy's being, and then I'm apologizing to this other guy, like, dude, I'm sorry, I not know. It's like, brother, I'm in the business and I don't know how to do this. So, but
Oh, dang.
I have it's just kind of you're backstage and I'm watching a particular ECW original just kind of stare at us throwing a football around smoking a joint, just staring at me and all of us as we don't know how to put a ring together. And there's I won't mention that guy. I'll name drop the next one. There's Tracy Smothers, who's like trying to get everything together, and he's just kind of looking at us, and I'm hearing him go, "What the hell's taking so damn long with that ring?" And I'm like, "Oh, Tracy Smothers isn't at the job I'm doing." But it is every time I've helped set up and tear down a ring, it's always been a different adventure. Of this ring's put together this way, and this ring was put together this other way. So I don't know if you've had the same experience, but for me, that was my adventures in ring setup.
Yeah, we kept, when I did ring crew for PWF, we kept the same ring. So it was like consistently one ring that you had each show. You knew which boards go where the canvas was going to go. So we got really lucky with that. Going forward, I'm still actually doing artwork for John. I actually just designed the uh, World Heavyweight Championship belt for Chicagoland Championship Wrestling.
Okay, well, since you mentioned it, do you want to talk about Chicagoland Championship Wrestling for a bit?
Yeah, this is my husband's newest promotion. We are really excited about it. We have a bi-weekly show on Alco TV, and on our regular TV show, we interview people from around the Chicagoland area. We let them talk about their careers, what led them to wrestling, how they're going to enter our company, and we show matches every 2 weeks from other companies around the area. And then we are looking at doing our first TV taping once everything with COVID is done. We were going to do the TV taping with a full wrestling show for April, but that got canceled because of COVID. But once COVID is clear and everything's gone back to normal, we're actually shooting a wrestling show for Amazon Prime.
Oh wow! So yeah, definitely uh, want to plug some social media for Chicagoland Championship Wrestling.
Yeah, check out our website at chicagolandchampionshipwrestling.com. I run the website there too, and we will have updates for when the next show is going to be available. Also look for Chicagoland Championship Wrestling on Facebook, and look for Mr. Chicago Wrestling on Instagram.
Okay, so definitely I'll put links to that in the description box below. Uh, you mentioned I want to. This is something I did want to talk about before we ran out of time. You mentioned your book uh, with featuring your artwork. What made you want to write the book, and what was the idea behind the book itself?
Well, when I wrote my first book in 2015, Wrestling Between Ache and Bullard, I was just kind of looking at a lot of the older artwork that was sitting on my computer, and I thought to myself, I wonder what would happen if I put this in a little mini art book. So I just as an experiment, I put together the art and a couple of wrestling stories and a couple of wrestling jokes into this book and a couple of poems that I had written about wrestling as well. And I put it up just as a love letter to professional wrestling on Amazon's old platform, CreateSpace. And pardon me.
Okay.
And to my surprise, like it's gotten a 5-star rating like within the first month that it was published.
So, is it still available? Will you be
Oh
able?
yeah,
Okay, I'll link to that as well. So be sure. What is the name of your book again?
wrestling wrestling between Ache and Bullard.
Okay, so definitely go check that out. And the last thing I wanted to talk to you about was you had the Moon Sisters website that you ran. Is that still available? Because I remember that was something that would always come up on my news feed quite a bit, and I showed some anime fans that I knew. I plugged it to them. Is that still available, or what went into running a website like that for anybody who might come across this and want to run that a similar website, I should say.
Well, my website is still going. We just celebrated 15 years since its operation back in February 18th. Moon Sisters, I created this website back in 2005 because there's this one character in the Sailor Moon manga. Her name is Kousagi, and she is Chibiusa's younger sister. And for some reason, I guess because at the time the rest of the manga hadn't come over to the United States, not a whole lot of Sailor Moon websites had anything on her. And if they did have anything on her, it was usually raw information from people who probably just guessed the story by looking at the pictures, but didn't actually read it. So I started the website initially to bring awareness to the character, and then it just kind of grew into its own thing. I put up Sailor Moon jokes, I would do my own videos for it, I even coded a few games for it, although I find they don't always work with Chrome, but
Right.
I did code several games for it, and I'm still running it. I've recently started the episode guide on there, so I'm going through different episodes, putting up trivia, hidden screenshots, why certain episodes are drawn the way they are, and it's still going. It is still going strong. I even got interviewed last year for Kotaku because one of the pages on there is about the lost pitch reel for an Americanized version of Sailor Moon. People call it Saban Moon because it looks like something Saban would do, but it was actually done by a company called Two Makers.
Okay.
If you ever see it, it's a terrible music video that they did of what would happen if there was an Americanized Sailor Moon. And I have a page on Moon Sisters that details this, and they actually interviewed me for Kotaku about it.
I never even knew you got interviewed by that. That is awesome. So you're definitely stepping significantly down in the world being a part of this podcast. That's what I'm getting out of that.
Oh, yeah, Moon Sisters is still going though. It's my 15-year-old baby.
Well, that is wow. That is awesome, and that's pretty much all the basis of everything that I've ever that I've known you for since I met you. Thanks to a lovely little video combining anime art of Brian Danielson and Nigel McGuinness with a dog collar match that saw Jimmy Jacobs lose a significant amount of blood. Who would have thought friendship would start that way?
I know, it starts in the most crazy of places.
Indeed. So, I mean, we've pretty much. One more time, do you want to let everybody know where to, if they want to message you or check out some of your stuff, go through it one more time?
Sure. If you want to check out what I'm currently working on, go to KorianderBullard.com. If you want to check out Moonsisters, go to moonsisters.org. Definitely do me a favor and check out ChicagolandChampionshipWrestling.com. And one more site I want to throw out there, Kichan, that is KI-CHAN.org. That is the official website to my current book series.
Awesome. So go check that out, and I will also link to your books and your Ace Steel T-shirt in the comments section below. So thank you very much for agreeing to do this. I know it was a long road coming here with the technological issues before this whole thing started, but we finally got it. Hopefully.
Yeah, not a problem. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you, and appreciate several years of talking Ring of Honor and other various wrestling promotions and technological help with my Roku. That was a big one that I remember. And that's just the personal stuff. But here's to 15 more years of Moonsisters and many more great wrestling stories.
Thank you so much.
All right, so thank you all for joining us this week. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, share, subscribe for more content from all aspects of geek culture, anime, pro wrestling, comic books, gamings, you name it. And follow me on Facebook.com/AthleticGeek89, Twitter @Athletic_Geek89, and Instagram @AthleticGeek89. Check out Moonsisters, buy her book, do everything. We'll see you next time.